Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we are talking about a topic that we've always mentioned, but never really took a deep dive into it, and that is the British colonial rule in India. So sit back, relax, get your pens or writing utensils out, and let's take some notes. All right. So still in chapter 7. Um, you don't need to save a page in your notebook. Just continue on writing these notes. British rule in India, chapter 7, lesson 3. So that was your warm up. Objectives. So we're going to sequence information to learn about the effects of imperialism, and then identify the causes and effects of the Sepoy Mutiny or the Great Rebellion, the First War for Independence, whatever you want to call it. All right. So Sepoy Rebellion. So we're starting off hot. We're starting off quick. Over the course of the 18th century, British power in India had increased while the power of the Mughal rulers had declined. The British government gave a trading company, the British East India Company, power to become actively involved in India's political and military affairs. To rule India, the British East India Company had its own soldiers and forts. They hired Indian soldiers known as sepoys to protect the company's interests in the region. So, in 1857, there was a growing Indian distrust of the British, which is going to lead to a revolt. Depends on who you talk to. The British call it the revolt a Sepoy mutiny, mutiny meaning an open rebellion against authority. The Indians call it their first war of independence. Neutrals call it the Great Rebellion. Tomato, tomato. Same thing. The major and immediate cause of the revolt was a rumor that the troops' new rifle cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat. Now, if you know anything about Indian and Muslim cultures, the cow is sacred to Hindus, and pigs are taboo to Muslims. They don't eat cow, they don't eat pig, pork. And to load a rifle at this time in history, soldiers would have to bite off the end of the cartridge to dislodge the bullet into their rifle. But to the sepoys, they are both Hindu or Muslim. Touching these grease cartridges to their lips would mean they themselves were polluted. It's against their religion. It's against their beliefs. And there was this rumor that the British did this against the Indians. So a group of sepoys at an army post in Meerut near Delhi refused to load their rifles with these cartridges. The British will charge them with mutiny, publicly humiliating them and then putting them in prison. The treatment of their comrades enraged the sepoy troops in Meerut. They went on a rampage, killing 50 European men, women, and children. Soon, other Indians will join the revolt, including princes whose land the British had taken from. So everyone's joining in, and they do not like what is happening in their country. So that's the British East India Company. If I knew what Latin words were, I'd read that to you, but I can't. So this is the East India Company trade. This is where they were heavily trading around 1800. So again, the red is British possessions in 1800. So the dark red right up in here. And then the pink is in 1860, and gold is by 1900. This is again another map of India showing how Britain gained slowly from red to orange, okay, to pink, and then green was added as like protectorates. These are the sepoys, probably getting yelled at right now. All right, so this is how you bite off a cartridge. You bite off this end piece, okay? The bullet's down here, the gunpowder's right there. You bite it. You then had to pour the gunpowder into the muzzle, then the rifle thrust, and it's still wrapped in the cartridge paper into it. So they would take their ramrod and slot it beneath the rifle barrel. Boom. Set the target and fire. Effects. So within a year, Indian troops loyal to the British and fresh British troops crushed this rebellion in the end. Although Indian troops fought bravely and outnumbered the British from about 235,000 to 45,000, that's a biggin. They were not well organized. Rivalries between Hindus and Muslims kept the Indians from working together. Atrocities were terrible on both sides. At Kanpur, Indians massacred 200 defenseless women, children in a building known as the House of the Ladies. When the British recaptured Kanpur, they took their own revenge out before they executed the Indians there. As a result of the Sepoy Rebellion, the British Parliament transferred powers of the East India Company directly to those of the British government. In 1876, Britain's Queen Victoria took the title Empress of India. The people of India were now her directly governed colonial subjects, and India became the jewel in her imperial crown. Although the rebellion failed, it helped fuel Indian nationalism. This rebellion marked the first significant attempt of the people of South Asia to throw off the British Raj, or the British rule. Later, a new generation of Indian leaders would take up the cause for independence. Okay, that's the House of the Ladies. This is a representation of them being defenseless. And then here's Queen Victoria in her later days. All right, directly British. So after the Great Rebellion, the British government began to rule India directly. They had been ruling it indirectly through the British East India Company. They appointed a British official known as a viceroy, who is a governor who ruled as a representative of the monarch, and the British civil service staff assisted the viceroy. This staff, about 3,500 people, ruled almost 300 million people, the largest colonial population in the world. The British rule involved benefits that it would come at cost for the Indians. British rule in India had several benefits for its colonial subjects. It brought order and stability to a society badly divided into many states with different and sometimes opposing political systems. It also led to a fairly honest and efficient government. There's that E word, efficiency, from the Industrial Revolution. Through the efforts of the British administrator and historian Lord Thomas Macaulay, a new school system was set up and they used the English language. The goal of the excuse me. Excuse me. The goal of this new school system was to train Indian children to serve in the government and army. The new system only served the elite upper class Indians, while 90% of the population remained relatively illiterate and uneducated. Decisions. The British hired, voice crack. The British hired Indians and built roads, canals, universities, and medicinal centers. A postal service was introduced shortly after it appeared in Great Britain. India's first rail network began in Mumbai, opening in 1853, and by 1900, India had 25,000 miles of railroad. Health and sanitation conditions also improved due to the British thinking they were helping. That's Thomas Macaulay. Awkward. So the Indian people paid a high price for the peace and stability brought by British rule. Economically speaking, British entrepreneurs and a small number of Indians reaped the financial benefits from British rule, but it brought hardship to millions of others in both the cities and the countryside. British manufactured goods destroyed local industries. British textiles put thousands of women out of work and severely damaged the Indian textile industry. In rural areas, the British sent zamindars to collect taxes. Zamindars, I looked it up. They're like governors, leaders of the state or region. So in rural areas, they sent the leaders of the region to collect taxes for the British. The British believed that by using these local officials would help it make easier to collect taxes from the peasants because, Boston Massacre, Boston Tea Party, America, bad experience there, right? However, the zamindars in India took advantage of their new authority. They increased taxes, forced the less fortunate peasants to become tenants or to lose their land entirely, and unrest grew. The British also encouraged many Indian farmers to switch from growing food to just growing cotton. Weird. As a consequence, food supplies could not keep up with the growing population. Between 1800 and 1900, 30 million Indians died due to starvation. Finally, British rule was degrading even for the newly educated upper classes who benefited most from it. The best jobs and the best housing were reserved for Britons, although many British colonial officials sincerely tried to improve the lot of India. British arrogance and racial attitudes cut deeply into the pride of many Indians and led to the rise of Indian nationalist movement. I mean, you're not going to forget about how you were mistreated in the Sepoy Mutiny, the Great Rebellion, and think that the British are there to help you. I wouldn't think like that. That's a picture of a zamindar. All right, nationalists. Remember, nationalism means what? Pride for your country. Oh, thank you. Thank you. The first Indian nationalists were upper class and English educated. Many of them were in urban areas like Mumbai, Chennai, or Calcutta. Some were trained in British law, and they were members of the civil service. At first, many Indian nationalists preferred reform than revolution. But the slow pace of reform convinced many that relying on British goodwill was futile. In 1885, a small group of Indians met in Mumbai to form the Indian National Conference. The Indian National Conference did not demand immediate independence, but called for a share in the governing process. The Indian National Conference also had difficulties on how to due to religious differences. The conference sought independence for all Indians, regardless of class and religious background, but many of its leaders were Hindu and reflected Hindu concerns. Later, Muslims called for the creation of a separate group called the Muslim League. This league would represent the interests of the millions of Muslims in Indian society. In 1914, the return of a young Hindu from South Africa brought new life to India's struggle for independence. Mohandas Gandhi, born in 1869 in Gujarat, Western India, he studied and became a lawyer from a school in London. 1893, Gandhi was sent to South Africa to work in a law firm serving Indian workers in South Africa. He learned of the racial exploitation of Indians living in British-controlled South Africa. So, on his return to India, Gandhi became active in the independence movement. Using his experience in South Africa, he began a movement based on non-violent resistance. Its aim was to force the British to improve the lot of the poor and to grant independence to India. Ultimately, Gandhi's movement will lead to Indian independence. So that's the Indian National Conference. That is their flag. That's a young Gandhi on the left, and that's a old Gandhi in his later years on the right. All right, Dr. Dis. So from the beginning of their rule, the British imposed their own cultural norms on India, and they often showed disrespect for India's cultural heritage. The Taj Mahal, being one of them, was a tomb built for the beloved wife of an Indian ruler in the 1600s. I looked this up as well. 1661 it was built. The British, while being there, used it as a favorite site for weddings and parties, and even some party goers would take, what do you call it? They would take hammers and chip off pieces and say they took souvenirs from the Taj Mahal. You know, this is one of the 7 wonders of the world. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's that. It's a mausoleum. So the tension in India that arose from British domination will lead to a cultural awakening as well. Cultural revival began in early 19th century with the creation of the British College in Calcutta. A local publishing house was opened and issued textbooks on a variety of subjects, including sciences, Sanskrit, and Western literature. Publisher also printed grammars and dictionaries in various Indian languages. This revival soon spread to other regions of India. It led to a search of new national identity and literary expression. Indian novelists and poets began to write historical romances and epics in their language, but some wrote in English and were very uncomfortable doing so because they preferred to write in their own languages. Printed in the various regional Indian languages, newspapers were also a common medium to use to rouse support for nationalist causes. These newspapers reached the lower middle class populations, tens of thousands of Indians who had never learned a word of English. Some writers used innuendo to convey negative feelings about the British without ever writing anything that would have them be seen as disloyal. As parts of in Indian religious traditions were also affected by the technological changes happening in the subcontinent, as parts of India were being better connected to the rail system, religious traditions had from the once isolated region spread out into the subcontinent. These traditions left a mark on larger religious traditions while retaining their religious regional identities. So there you go. Disrespect. That's Dr. Disrespect. If you don't know who I'm talking about, he's a content creator on the YouTube, and that's the Taj Mahal. Very pretty, and millions of people go visit it every year. And it's a mausoleum. It's a big mausoleum, a big thing, but it's so pretty. It's a structural. I mean, this was built in 1661. Yeah, very, very important. Okay, that's going to conclude our lecture. Happened real quick. It was only 6 slides, so, you know, there's some thought behind my madness, making it short for you guys. You know, 1 question warm-ups, come on. Anyways, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. I know in my past experiences teaching world history, I've never had the chance to talk about this topic, so it was new learning for me, and I hope you learned some of it as well. The British aren't nice. So your homework is page 276, 2 through 4. Page 276, 2 through 4. All 2 through 4. 2, 3, and 4. Stop forgetting to answer question number 3. Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. First.